Hello students, this is Barkha Gaur from Shiv Jyoti Educational Group Kota. How are you students? I hope you all are fine at your places. So students, today in this video we are going to discuss chapter 9, Heredity and Evolution. For better understanding, I advise you to open your book, page number 142. So students, as you know, we have already studied about reproduction and we have studied about asexual and sexual reproduction. We have seen that asexual reproduction shows very less variation because only the reason for variation is there what? Variation किस कारण से आते हैं वहाँ पे? Only at the time of जब DNA का copy बनता है, at that time only small errors leads to variation. So there is very less chances of variation in that case. Whereas in sexual reproduction, we see that there are many different kinds of organisms we see around us, which shows that there are too much variation due to sexual reproduction. So let us understand about heredity and what are the variations. We see in a field, suppose we see in a crop field, we see that there are all types of plants are very similar to each other. But when we talk about human beings, we can see there are different, all of us have different faces and we are very different from each other and they show variations. So variation is what? Differences among us. So why is it so? Why we are so different? So we will study in detail about it with the help of this animation. So let us see blueprint. What is DNA? DNA is actually the blueprint of life. That means DNA is the thing which makes us different from each other and it provides the basic body design to ourselves. We can see that there are multicellular organisms and unicellular organisms also, and the DNA lies in the nucleus which is responsible for the basic body design and also for the variations which are coming in our body. If we talk about unicellular organisms, we see that amoeba, the daughter cells of amoeba are exactly similar to their parents. Similarly, paramecium, euglena, all these are unicellular organisms and they show similarity to each other. Now, when we talk about multicellular organisms, like you can see on the screen, rabbit, they are multicellular and the organisms or the individuals with opposite sex produce gametes. We have studied about asexual and sexual reproduction, that asexual organisms reproduces by simple cell division, whereas sexually reproducing organisms क्या होता है इनमें, the individuals of opposite sex produces gametes, है ना. तो इनमें gametes produce होते हैं and the gametes का क्या होगा, fusion. You can see that they are quite dissimilar to each other also and the different organisms have variations. That means they are not very similar to each other. Okay. So these are the two individuals, male rabbit and female rabbit, and they are producing the gametes, and when they produce gametes, the gametes will fuse with each other and it will form zygote. Zygote will divide, you can see that zygote is dividing and it is dividing into other cells, many cells are formed and the individual, new individual is produced. Now you can see that some characters are similar. This new individual have some characters similar to their parents, like देखिए आप, some characters will be similar to their parents, but some characters would be there which are not similar to their parents and they are new characters. So we can divide the characters or traits. Traits is same as the characters. So traits हम यहाँ पे use करेंगे word. Traits means the appearance or the physical characters which are shown to us. You can see some characters are similar which are produced in the individual, new individual, but some new characters are also produced. So characters which are transmitted as it is from parents to offsprings can be called as parental traits, whereas the characters which are new combinations जब बनते हैं, तो these traits are called new traits. You can see the shape and size of the ear of these rabbits is different and the shape and size of the new rabbit is quite different. So these are the new traits. So in sexual reproduction we see that some traits are parental traits and some are new traits which are newly formed. So we can see that these are the difference between asexual and sexual reproduction also. Okay, now the thing which is responsible for all these differences या variations क्या होते हैं बच्चों? Variations are the differences. ठीक है, जो differences हम सभी individuals में we have differences, we have different shape of eyes, we have different shape of nose and skin color, hair color, eye color, ये सब क्या है? Variations हैं. तो sexual reproduction basically provide variations which is useful for the survival also. Now you can see variations in nature. If you observe yourself and different members in your family, you will find different ear lobes. ठीक है, this example is given in your book also. You can see the shape of your ear. Some may have ear like this. This type of ear lobe is called free ear lobe. Free ear lobe है ये. And sometimes your ear lobe may be attached to your cheek. So that type of ear lobe will be called attached ear lobe. So basically there are two kinds of ear lobes present among us, that is free ear lobe and attached ear lobe. So this is also a kind of inherited traits. The traits which are passed from one generation to another generation are called inherited traits, and one example of inherited traits is presence of ear lobes, and ear lobes can be of two types, attached ear lobes and free ear lobes. Now when we will further study about this chapter, the dominant word will come to you, dominant and recessive. The free ear lobe is the dominant character, whereas attached ear lobe is the recessive character. So there are different characters or traits which are inherited from one generation to another. Like you can see the color of eyes, color of skin, color of hair. Now how these variations are coming? As we have studied already about meiosis, we have studied in class 11th about mitosis and meiosis. So mitosis is the equational division which takes place in all our somatic cells. सब में जो cell divide होते हैं, they takes place through mitosis. Whereas meiosis, when we talk about meiosis, we have studied about it that crossing over takes place during the prophase 1 of meiosis. Prophase 1 of meiosis में हमने पढ़ा है कि it is the reductional division, meiosis is the reductional division in which new combinations are formed. प्रोफेज 1 के टाइम क्रॉसिंग ओवर होते हैं, क्रॉसिंग ओवर से न्यू कॉम्बिनेशंस बनते हैं, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ द होल meiosis डिवीजन 4 हैप्लॉइड सेल्स आर फॉर्म्ड. तो दिस टेक्स प्लेस ड्यूरिंग द गैमेट फॉर्मेशन. Gametes are produced by the process of meiosis, by which chromosome number is reduced to half. This we have already understood, but these are the basis of variation. That's why I am explaining you this. तो ये meiosis leads to variation. Now chromosomal recombination, chromosomes recombine होंगे and new characters will be produced which will lead to the variation. You can see these are the pair of chromosome, and when they crossing over होगा इनमें, and they will just the characters या जो genes होते हैं वो cross over होते हैं and the new combinations are formed. This is the one of the chromosome and this is another chromosome. अब आप यहाँ देखो small a, small b and small c, ये इसके पार्ट थे, and capital A, capital B, capital C. But now after crossing over, यहाँ पे देखिए क्या हो जाएगा, small a, small b, but capital C आ गया. तो here what will happen? New combination is formed. Capital B, A, capital B and small c. So this shows कि how recombination takes place and variations occur by exchange of chromosomes. So variation is very less in asexual reproduction. Only we have seen जैसे due to the minor inaccuracies while DNA copy, जब DNA की copy होती है तो उसमें small inaccuracies, small errors के कारण ही सिर्फ variations आते हैं. And when a number of variations are accumulated, variations बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाते हैं, तो what will happen? New species will be formed, and the process of formation of new species is called speciation. Now these variations help in survival of the species. As we have already studied in the previous chapter also, कि unicellular organisms inherit characters like resistance to certain environmental stresses. जैसे हमने पढ़ा था कि कोई habitat है and it has normal water, but if suddenly the temperature of water increases in which many fishes or bacteria are living, so they will, some of the bacteria will not be able to live in that increased temperature, so they will die. But some of the variants जिनमें variation आ चुका होगा, those variants will be able to survive because in that increased temperature, because they have adopted the variation. उनमें कुछ mutations आ गए होंगे, variations आ गए होंगे, because of that they are able to survive in that environmental stress also. So these variations help to become resistant. जैसे one more example is there, in a population of bacteria, some might be resistant to antibiotics. So this resistant to antibiotic is also one of the reason of variation. So variations leads to help in the survival of the species. Now let us understand about the accumulation of variation. What happens actually? The variations accumulate from one generation to another. So we will study about accumulation of variations. Like suppose this is a fish of first generation and it has these following features. Now when this fish is giving rise to new generation, जब new species या new generation arise होगी, then there will be some variation. देखो suppose ये हम इस fin की बात करें तो this is white in color and this is light blue, this is dark blue. So this is one example of variation. That means variation has occurred from one generation to another. Now variations will occur, but basic body design will remain same. So basic body design will remain same due to the DNA. DNA में जो blueprint है, blueprint means the basic body design will be same, but small variations will also be there. So these variations will be accumulated in every generation, and again when they will give rise to third generation, so these variations will also be there and new variations will also be there. So variations will be accumulated from generation to generation. You can see new variations are also there and old variations are also getting accumulated. So in this way we can see that variations gets accumulated and these variations helps in the survival of the species. These are the third generation, this is second generation and this is the first generation. So this is one of the example how variations get accumulated. You can see in your book on page number 142 there is an example of bacteria, है ना. तो bacteria के help से आप भी समझ सकते हैं कि variations how they are accumulated. Now around us we can see the different types of species, different types of fishes, how they are different from each other. So this is the example of variations. Now each organism give birth to offspring having all basic characters similar to parents. So this is always there कि basic character will remain there and new characters will also arise. So individuals resemble their parents or to near ancestors due to factors determined by heredity. So how these characters are getting transmitted and how variations are taking place, this is what we are going to understand in this chapter. Now let us understand about heredity. What is heredity? Actually heredity is the process by which genetic information is transmitted from parents to offspring. So this is a phenomena due to which the characters are being transmitted from one generation to another. The sum of parental characters are transmitted from one generation to next via the process of sexual reproduction. Now these will be called as inherited traits. The traits which are transmitted from one generation to another is called inherited traits. So what happens basically, the basic body design remains same, है ना. Basic body design means suppose how we are, how many hands we have, eyes, the position of eyes, hands and everything is same. So this is what basic body design, but the character, some variations are also there. You can see this is also one of the type of variation, hair type. some have curly hair, wavy hair, and some have straight hair. So these are also variations of hair type. Now one more inherited trait I would like to discuss here, like rolling tongue. Okay, some of you might be able to roll your tongue like this, but some of you might not be able to roll your tongue. So this trait will be called as rolling tongue, and this trait will be called as non-rolling tongue. So these are also inherited traits. Similarly, cleft chin, normal chin, and dimples, these are also inherited traits. And all these inherited traits are governed by genes, means controlled by genes. So genes is the basic unit of heredity which is controlling all the characters of our body. Now let us understand about the Mendel. Mendel is also known as father of genetics. So we have studied about how the characters are inherited. Now we will study what Mendel has done in this field. So Mendel is also known as father of genetics, Gregor John Mendel. What he did and how he did, let's understand. Actually, he did his experiments on a plant which is known as garden pea plant, and its scientific name is Pisum sativum. So he chose this plant for his experiments. Why did he choose these plants for his experiments? That also I will explain you. And how did he perform his experiments? This we will also study. So we are on page number 143. Now we will come to page 144. A short introduction of Gregor John Mendel is given here. So let us see that Mendel was born in 1822 in Austria and regarded as father of genetics. He discovered most fundamental laws of genetics, means he gave the laws of genetics which are called as Mendel's law of inheritance also, and he chose garden pea to conduct his breeding experiments. Now while he studied this plant, he observed that there are many contrasting characters in these plants. Actually, why did he choose garden pea plant? Because to do any experiment on human beings or on the animals, it takes a long time, and उसमें control भी बहुत कम होता है हमारा, उनकी life का span जो होता है, it is also very much. So plants are very suitable for performing the experiment. And another thing, they also show cross fertilization also and self fertilization. Self pollination भी हो जाता है, cross pollination भी हो जाता है, so it's easy to take this plant. And one of the most important thing was this, कि he found many contrasting characters in this plant. Contrasting characters means जो हम एकदम से observe कर सकते हैं. We can observe कि some plants are very tall, some plants are short. So similarly, he observed 7 pairs of contrasting characters in pea and studied their inheritance pattern. So let us see what were those 7 contrasting characters. Now first of all, purple. He observed that there are 2 kinds of flowers on it. One is purple or violet, which is the dominant character, and one was some flowers were white. I will explain you what is dominant and recessive later on, but you just first of all note down or understand the 7 contrasting characters. So some were violet flower and some were white flower. Now the gene, gene is one thing, which is controlling the one of the character. So some gene must be there which is controlling the flower color. So now flower color are of 2 types, violet and white. Similarly, position of flower, he observed that flower position was also of 2 kinds. Like some plants have axial position, आप देख सकते हो यहाँ पे side में this flower is coming, so some have axial position which is the dominant again, and some have terminal position, बिल्कुल tip पे flower है. तो flower position was also observed as 2. Third, some pod shape देखते हैं, pod shape it has inflated pod shape, some plants have inflated pod shape and some have constricted. You can see in the diagram, constricted means they have constrictions in it. Then next character was pod color, है ना, pod is the, ये जो ऊपर का छिलका है इसका, this is the pod. So this is green in color and this is yellow in color. So 2 types of pod color were observed. Then seed shape, some seeds were round. Round is considered as dominant character, and some seeds were wrinkled, which is the recessive character. Seed color. This was seed shape, this is seed color now. Yellow color seed was dominant and green color seed was recessive. Now comes the height. Plants की height के बारे में बात करें तो there were two kinds of heighted plants. One were tall, some were tall and some were short. So tall is the dominant character and short is the recessive characters. First, now we'll see okay, how he observed the plants in first generation, second generation, and we'll understand the terminology related to these topics. Now we'll see what is F1. F1 is the first generation progeny. That means जब उसको first time जो progeny मिले होगी, first time जो offspring मिले, that would be called as F1 या first filial generation भी कहते हैं इनको. And all individuals showed only one parental character. Other characters did not appear. तो उसने जो भी plants लिए थे उनमें से only one character was observed in the plants. And in F2 generation, when he self-pollinated F1 progeny, both parental characters appeared. So we'll understand it, how it happened. तो since individuals possess two copies of each gene, अब आप एक बात समझिए बच्चों, जब भी हम न्यूक्लियस में क्रोमोसोम्स की बात करते हैं, we always understand chromosome in pairs. हम ये हमेशा देखते हैं कि क्रोमोसोम पेयर में होते हैं. ऐसे ही तो one of the pair is coming from father and one is coming from mother. ठीक है, आपने पढ़ा है जब गैमेट्स बनते हैं, गैमेट्स में क्या होता है, सिंगल सेट ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स होता है. ठीक है, सपोज इन आवर बॉडी इन एवरी सेल वी हैव 23 पेयर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स, बट व्हेन गैमेट्स आर फॉर्म्ड तो क्या होगा, गैमेट जो होगा, गैमेट में सिर्फ वन सेट ऑफ क्रोमोसोम ही होगा. दैट मीन्स वी हैव ओनली 23 क्रोमोसोम इन गैमेट्स. एंड व्हेन दीज गैमेट्स फ्यूज टुगेदर तो जायगोट बनता है एंड वी गेट 46 क्रोमोसोम्स. और हम इसमें देखेंगे तो फिर हमें पेयर मिल जाएंगे. ठीक है, द क्रोमोसोम्स आर प्रेजेंट इन पेयर, वेयरएज इसमें क्या होंगे, ये पेयर में प्रेजेंट नहीं होंगे, सिंगल सिंगल सेट होगा. नाउ एज दिस इज द जायगोट, ये डिप्लॉइड है, इसमें पेयर्स नजर आ रहे हैं आपको. तो ये पेयर जो है इनमें से वन इज ऑब्टेन्ड फ्रॉम फादर एंड वन इज ऑब्टेन्ड फ्रॉम मदर. तो वी कैन सी individuals possess two copies of each gene from each parent, जिनको हम factors भी कह सकते हैं, and it exists in pairs in cells. So behind each character there is a pair of factors, या इनको हम alleles word भी use करते हैं, alleles. Now we'll see how did he obtain the plants of pea plant, किस तरह से उन्होंने obtain किए. Now as you can see, this is parent 1 and this parent 1 is tall. ठीक है, इसका कैरेक्टर कैसा है, tall है, it's straight. That means we are talking here about the height of the plant. यहाँ पे हम बात कर रहे हैं height of the plant की. And the parents we choose, जो parents हमने choose किए, one of the parent was tall and one of the parent is dwarf. Dwarf या short कहते हैं इसको. Now the offspring which we obtained in the first generation कैसे थे, देखिए, ऑल आर सिमिलर टू वन ऑफ द पेरेंट. इनके जैसे वन ऑफ द पेरेंट के जैसे ही हैं. दैट मीन्स ओनली वन कैरेक्टर इज एक्सप्रेस्ड इन फर्स्ट जनरेशन. ठीक है, तो ऑल टॉल, ओनली डोमिनेंट कैरेक्टर. वी हैव स्टडीड दैट टॉलनेस इज द डोमिनेंट कैरेक्टर. तो फर्स्ट जनरेशन में हमें सारे ऑफस्प्रिंग कैसे मिल रहे हैं, टॉल. एंड इन द सेकेंड जनरेशन वी आर गेटिंग, सी, 1, 2 and 3. These are similar to this of this parent and this one is similar to dwarf parent. So what we are getting tall and dwarf plant in the ratio of 3:1. 3 tall plants and 1 dwarf plants. So this was the observation of Mendel. First he took parents tall and dwarf, so he got all plants tall. ठीक है, then he self-pollinated the first generation progeny and he observed and he was surprised to see this कि some were tall, that means 75% of the progeny were tall and 25% were dwarf. So these were the observation of Mendel. We can also understand with another example which is given in your book also on page number 145, figure 9.4. It is based on the flower color. So we have seen that there are two kinds of flower in these plants, purple या violet also we can say, and white flower. So when he crossed these plants, see this is purple and this is white. So when he crossed, तो in the first generation he got all purple flowers. उनको क्या मिले? सारे purple flowers से मिले, which was the dominant character. Now let us understand about genes and alleles. See, gene, suppose height का gene, color, flower color का gene या pod color का gene, this is gene. But every gene has two alleles. ठीक है? हर gene के two alleles होते हैं. And which represent, so out of these two alleles, one will be dominant and one will be recessive. We can understand by this, जैसे अभी हम बात कर रहे हैं, and every character या जैसे जीन है तो जीन के दो alleles हैं. Suppose we are talking about this, तो capital T and capital T. This is for height of the plant, tallness की हम बात कर रहे हैं. This is one of the allele and this is one of the allele of one gene which is responsible for a particular character. So characters are controlled by single gene or factor and can have two alternative forms which are known as allelomorphs or alleles. तो ये दोनों one gene के alleles हैं. ठीक है? It can be like this also. Combination ऐसा भी हो सकता है और combination can be like this also. तो these both are what? Alleles of one gene. तो ये allelic form है. अगर कॉम्बिनेशन ये होता है, सपोज फादर से हमें कैपिटल टी मिला या प्लांट को एंड मदर से कैपिटल टी मिला, तो दिस एलिक कॉम्बिनेशन जो है या जेनेटिक कॉम्बिनेशन है, दिस विल गिव राइज टू टॉल प्लांट. ठीक है? सिमिलरली दीज बोथ आर डोमिनेंट एलील्स, एज दिस इज डोमिनेंट एलील एंड दिस इज रेसेसिव एलील. तो द कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ डोमिनेंट एंड रेसेसिव will give rise to dominant only and the plant will be tall. Similarly, small t, these both are recessive. So when the recessive alleles are present together, then only this character will be expressed. जब recessive alleles दोनों साथ में होते हैं तभी recessive character appear होता है. तो this plant will be dwarf, or we can also say short heighted plants. So this will be the combination of alleles. Alleles are represented by alphabets, dominant in capital letters and recessive in small letters. So whenever we will talk about any one character, तो हम dominant को capital letter से express करेंगे and recessive को small letter से express करेंगे. Now in a cross between tall and dwarf plants, first generation plants were all tall, है ना? As we have seen कि सारे plants हमें कैसे मिले थे? Tall मिले थे. But were they genetically similar to parent tall plants? क्या ये बिल्कुल पेरेंट्स के जैसे ही, मतलब जेनेटिकली मीन्स इनका जीनोटाइप क्या था? नाउ विल स्टडी अबाउट टू थिंग्स, फेनोटाइप एंड जीनोटाइप. सो ये हमें पता लगाना है कि इट वाज टॉल लाइक इट्स पेरेंट ओनली या इसमें कुछ डिफरेंसेस थे. तो टू टेस्ट दिस, मेंडल परफॉर्म सेल्फ पॉलिनेशन टेस्ट ऑन बोथ पेरेंट्स एंड प्रोजेनी tall plants. Let's see this animation. What are genotype and phenotype? See, this is a tall plant. We are producing tall plants only from these plants. So we are sowing the seeds and self pollination took place. So we got all plants. कैसे plants मिले हमें सारे? Tall plants. So we have gathered tall plants and then we took dwarf plants and we got all dwarf plants. तो dwarf plants से dwarf plants मिले हमें and tall plants से we got tall plants. Now we crossed, हमने cross किया है tall plant को dwarf plant से. This is pure tall plant and this is pure dwarf. इनका genotype क्या होगा? Alleles क्या होंगे? capital T क्योंकि ये pure tall है and small t because it is pure dwarf plant. Now in the first generation, है ना? First generation में हमने क्या देखा? In first generation we got all tall plants. Now पहले तो हमने सिर्फ ऊपर से देखा था, that means we just observe the characteristics. Now we'll observe the genotype, that means genetic constitution क्या है इनका, we will understand that. तो इसका जीनोटाइप क्या है, दिस इज जीनोटाइप है ना, जीन्स का जब हम एलिल्स का कॉम्बिनेशन देखते हैं तो दैट इज कॉल्ड जीनोटाइप. तो द प्योर टॉल प्लांट हैज द जीनोटाइप कैपिटल T एंड प्योर ड्वार्फ स्मॉल t. नाउ द फर्स्ट जनरेशन प्लांट्स विच वी गॉट, इसका जीनोटाइप देखें, ऑल आर टॉल एंड दे हैव कैपिटल T स्मॉल t एंड ऑल आर टॉल, बट दे आर नॉट सिमिलर टू देयर पेरेंट. ठीक है, इस टॉल से अलग है ये. So this is as we are considering only one character, हम इसमें क्या ले रहे हैं, height. What we are observing in this example, height. So this we are considering only one character, that's why it is called monohybrid cross. क्या कहेंगे हम इसको, monohybrid cross. Cross that follows two variation or alleles in a single trait. We are considering only single trait. Now we'll see, we will self pollinate these offsprings of first generation. तो फर्स्ट जनरेशन की जब ऑफस्प्रिंग को हम सेल्फ पॉलिनेट कर रहे हैं, देखिए, तो नाउ लेट्स सी द सेकेंड जनरेशन की बात हो रही है अब, है ना. तो वी आर गेटिंग दीज काइंड्स ऑफ प्लांट्स. हाउ प्लांट्स वी आर गेटिंग, टॉल प्लांट्स. वी गॉट 3 प्लांट्स टॉल एंड 1 प्लांट ड्वार्फ प्लांट. बट अगेन सी दैट व्हाट इज द जीनोटाइप ऑफ दीज प्लांट्स. वी हैव ऑलरेडी सीन कि हमें 3 प्लांट्स आउट ऑफ 4 वी गॉट 3 प्लांट्स tall and we got 1 plant dwarf, but let us understand about the genotype. Phenotype तो मिल गया हमें 3:1 के रेशियो में, but what was the genotype? The parents were having this kind of genetic constitution, but now see, first plant, the one of the plant which we got is pure tall, and these 2 plants are hybrid tall. They are not similar to first generation parent के similar नहीं है, बल्कि they are hybrid tall. So we got, of course we got 3 tall plants, but 1 is pure tall and 2 are hybrid tall, and 1 we got dwarf plant. So this is the phenotypic ratio 3:1, and we will see the genotypic ratio. So what is the genotypic ratio here? 1:2:1. So this will be called as genotypic ratio. So expression of morphological characters as tall or dwarf plant is called phenotype, whereas expression of gene or chromosomal makeup of an individual for a particular trait is called genotype.